workflow. And let's start off with what is actually computational thinking. So this is not just about being a programmer or being in the technical space. It's about learning how to break problems into small steps, applying simple logic and creating processes we can repeat in research and in also other departments and also in also other domains. This helps us move, from, I can say, chaos to structure. The reason why this matters or why it's important, as researchers, we deal with a lot of repetitive tasks, organizing files, maybe renaming documents, sorting data, and all that. And this computational thinking helps you do these things faster with fewer mistakes and in a more consistent way. It increases, workflows, reduces errors, etc. And there are three key concepts which I have applied when preparing for this are the three we see on the screen right now. We speak of logic, variables, and step-by-step thinking. So these are the three ideas here. First, logic. If something happens, then we respond in a certain way. Variables, these are just pieces of information like file names, dates, all sorts of data that we are working with. And step-by-step thinking, which is breaking down the tasks into clear actions. So for example, with logic, we can have if a file name contains interview, so it's more like an instruction telling your system or your code or whatever tool you're using what to do when something happens. For example, if a file contains the name interview in a bunch of files, then move it to the interview folder. With variables, it can be a name like maybe interview methods lab 001. It's just stored information. And step by step examples, our step one can be identifying a file. Our step two can be checking the name. And our step three is actually moving the file. So it's just that step-by-step process that we take to actually complete the action. And we will move into the actual hands-on. So we actually see how this works, how it could help us, because I could give maybe a couple of research examples where we work with so many messy files, identifying, different types of rules, applying rules, and it's just a bit tedious. Sometimes it's a bit difficult. So the case study that I came with here is a research file with quite a number of files, or a research folder with quite a number of files. I've actually prepared that prior. So I have I have this research folder. I believe you can all see this folder with all the files. It has about 250 files, but imagine you working with much more files, maybe 1,000, 5,000, 10,000, could be more. But for this demo, we will work with just 250 files. And we can see there's different types of files. We have Excel files, TXT files, some PDFs, etc. And this is before our whole automation, where these files are just scattered. It might be hard to find certain information if you have more files, and it's going to take you time if you want to sort these things out manually. And after we apply the logic, what we want to have is, files that are automatically sorted, everything is structured, and our workflow becomes faster and easier. So let me show you a simple example of how this works in practice. The tool that I usually use almost every day is PyCharm. So this is an interpreter for Python code. So Python is a language which is very, very good for working with data, for working with, string manipulations, etc. And we usually use this for analyzing data, working with files, and much, much more. So the interface you see here is called PyCharm, but there's many other alternatives to this, like Colab, Notebook, or there's Stony as well. And there are a couple of online ones as well. But I prefer this local environment because it offers a bit more, what can I say? It just has that feel and it allows me to run everything I need to run much, much faster locally, of course. So I will start off by writing a couple of scripts, step by step, obviously, and I will explain how that actually works. But also, this script I'm writing here can be done with your AIs that we use every day by giving it a couple of prompts and it generates that script for you, which will allow you to do the same tasks. And okay, we're gonna start off by importing. So we need to import a couple of libraries. We start off by importing OS because OS is what allows our code to interact with the files on all our systems. So basically OS is operating system and it allows us to interact with all the files. Literally everything you're gonna write here, it needs to be connected to the files you have on your computer or wherever they're being stored. And that's what OS allows us to do. It allows us to do that. We're going to import shuttle, and this helps us move, copy, and manage files. So basically, this is like an access you're giving for your code to be able to move, copy, manipulate files on your computer. It needs some sort of permissions, and you need to import this to have that type of permission. And it's not only on this environment, on all environments. So if maybe using Collab Notebook, you still need to do the same thing for you to have permissions to access files on your local machine. So now we get into the actual logic and what we want to do with our files here. We want to organize our files into different folders. We want to have a folder for the interviews. Let me look for yeah, want to have a folder for my interviews. We see the interviews here. We want to have a folder for the articles. Where are my articles? Okay, we have the folders. We want to have a folder for the articles and we want to have a folder for data. Yeah, basically the Excel data, and we want to have a folder for notes, which is the field notes here. And that can be done well, once the code is complete, it should do that in less than a second or 2 seconds than doing it manually. Imagine having scattered files and there's like 10,000 files. So doing that manually becomes quite hectic. So what I'm going to tell my code is I want to create folders now. So I create a variable folder. And what you want to do is you just want to give it the names of the folders you want to create. So the first one is interview. The second folder is articles. That folder is my data. And The last folder is field notes. Oh, just name it like this, field notes. There we go. Field notes. Now, what I want to do now is I've told my code I want to create these folders. The next thing I want to tell my code to do is to loop through all the files here. Loop through all the files and then cluster them depending on whether they are interviews, articles, data, or field notes. So for us to loop through the folder first, we're just going to create a loop. And in Python, how we create loops is by using for, literally saying for folder in folders. So this is basically folder is all these folders we've just told our code we want to create for in folders. Let me just fix this folder. Yeah. So this starts a loop and it goes through each line in the list one by one. And the first loop is obviously interviews, then articles, and so on and so on. And we need to add a line that actually creates all the folders. And how we do that is we call the operating system. So I call the OS dot make dir. So make dir is make directories. I don't know if you've ever heard of that or probably used it in your shell before, but this is commands that I usually used a lot when people deal with computers and trying to manipulate their files and folders in the computers. So make directory, you call the operating system, you tell it to make a directory and you add a path as well. So that's os dot path dot join. So what you wanna join, you wanna now join all these folders to the base folder, which is your main folder. I think as time goes on, you'll start to see that the language Python is like English. It's how you say it. Okay, basically how you say it is how you write it. Some things might be a bit different, but even when reading it, it's just like English. Let me go through over that again. os.make directory, os.path dot join base folder. This is my main folder. My main folder, and then I join all the other subfolders in it. And then I check if it exists. And okay, it exists. True. Great. So that part allows us to make the subfolders. By the way, I'll just go back up here. Okay, this base folder it's aligned red because basically it does not exist. So you need to create a variable called base folder actually, and you need to give it the name of your actual base folder, which is the name of my folder is research files, this one here. So research files. Okay, now we see the error has disappeared. Is folders. All right, our errors are gone now. So what we have to do now is we need to loop through the files only. We need to create another loop for the files only. So basically all our files that are in here. All files that are in here. And basically what our
Apologies,
loop is,
Grady.
yeah,
There seems to be a question from Timley, if it's not Timely. Sorry for that, if I'm mispronouncing your
okay.
name. But it's
Yeah.
asking, isn't the array of folders supposed to be called folders, not folder?
Is what?
It's in the chat. He asks if the array of
Okay.
folders is supposed to be called folders and not folder, the array of folders.
Just check.
Oh, he says he already fixed it. You have already fixed
Okay.
it.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. All right. Where was I? Okay, the loop. So we're creating another loops and another loop, and it's going to loop through the research files. It's gonna get a list of everything inside files and folders, and it returns both files and folders. So what we need to do here is to create the actual loop, which is for again. Remember, for loops, we use for. There's other cases where you have to use something else, but for now, let's focus on this one. And for file, in I need to call the OS again. So the operating system dot list dir. This is another very common term. So list dir, it gives us a list of the directory. So even when you go on your terminal, on your command line, on your PCs, and you click on, and you type dir or list dir, it's going to give you like a list of all the files that you have in that current directory you are logged into. And basically we want the list of the base folder directory. So I'm going to put in base folder in my brackets here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another variable called file path. I create another variable called file path, and then I call the operating system again. os.path.join. I'll just click tab. The nice thing about this interpreter, especially the latest one, gives you suggestions. As you can see, sometimes even before I finish up a sentence, it gives me already a suggestion, and most of the time it's right. And yeah, basically here I created another variable. I called my OS. So I'm going into the path where I want to join the base folder, or rather the files to the base folder. Now, you might also wonder then how is it going to know which file is supposed to be in which folder? So there's logic that we're going to get to that's going to allow us to do that. And with that logic, we have what we call conditional statements. So we call them if statements. So it's like if, for example, um, if in the name of the file, this interview, then move it to the interview folder. So it's something like that. So it's those type of conditions. Or if the file is green, then do this, for example. So that's how if statement works, this conditional statement works. So they work like that. And there's usually, so you can create multiple if statements, and then you can create like a default escape so that if your condition is not met, there's a default escape. For example, if maybe my file name is green, do this, else do this. So the else is the default. So that's where it escapes to if your condition is not met. And I will create sorting logic. I should have been putting comments. It's not good to code, not comments. Okay. I'll do my sorting logic over here. And I'll create my if statements. So if, here's another suggestion. So I'll just type if interview in file. So basically what is being said here is if this term interview is in file. So any file here, if any file here contains the word interview, then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna call, I don't know if you remember the import that I did, shuttle. It allows us to move, copy folders, just manipulate folders in our directories. So I'm gonna call it shuttle.move. It gives us the permission to move folder. And then file path, we need to call the OS again, OS path dot join base folder interview. There we go. So basically here, if interview in file, so if the word interview is in any of our file, then we move that file to our base folder, interview folder. So here, this is our base folder, which is research files. As we declared it up here, you can see our base folder is research files. And our interview is this folder that we are going to create when we run this code. So we're moving it to the base folder under the interview folder. And we'll do the same for the other files. So now we do not do another if statement. We call it elif. So basically it's else if. So the first one is the if statement, the second one is the else if, but we write it as L if. In other languages though, it is written as else if. So I'll click tab. As you can see, the suggestions. These suggestions, they're pretty much most of the time accurate, but you can always turn them off, especially if you just want to know and understand how to write the code yourself. But if not, then you can always use them. So elif articles and files, then I move that file to the folder articles, elif data file. So if my file contain data, I move that file to the folder data in my base folder. And same for the field notes. Now, is the sorting logic. So that's the sorting logic and it's complete. Now, what I want to do is I'm gonna do print. So print is what allows us to see what we're doing. So it's like an output we receive on the terminal over here. So for me to see that this actually worked, I'm gonna say files, files sorted successfully. Okay, I don't need this one. I just want to see that my files were sorted successfully. And we could maybe add a nice emoji there. Unexpected indent. So every time there's a red line, that means there is an error. And what you don't want is to have errors. Oh, okay, now let me just quickly fix this. So basically these errors I'm getting because of indentation. So the code needs to be structured in a certain way. I can't have everything on one line. That's why you see these errors and now they are gone. So basically this code here should give us what we are looking for without any errors. And obviously, you can use prompts to quickly get this code, paste it in your IDE, and get the task done. So fingers crossed, this is our file. It's looking like this right now with all 250 items, and we want the code to categorize it for us. So I will just save the code and then run it. Okay, it says process finished with exit code 0. All right, so I refreshed. Now you see we have folders in here. At least my folders were created successfully, so that's a good thing. But my files have not been moved. My files are still here. So let's go back to the code and see why our files have not moved. We need to make sure all our naming conventions named properly. Okay, I see. So our word here is article and not articles. So that's another thing to be very careful of. So what we're working with is article. And interview. Okay, interview is good. Let me see data. Okay, it's survey data and not data. So survey data. Let's make sure everything else is named properly. Notes, field work. So it's notes, field work, and not field notes. So you need to make sure the names are exactly notes, field work, like this. Great. So let me run this again so we see if something changed. Okay, nothing. That's fine. Let's go back and take a look. So what we can do is we can skip files that don't match the naming conventions we've given them and continue with the next file and then come back to those other files later. So what I can do is before the logic, I can create a if statement, if os path, if os dot path is directory, and I put my file path in the bracket, then I can just continue. Basically, continue allows us to skip and move on to the next file. But I need to indent this so I don't have any errors. Okay, let's head back to our code.
Hi, Grady.
Hello.
There was a quick comment from Tim Lee saying file is not recognized because it is out of the loop. Just take note of that.
Just
Thank
see.
you.
File is not recognized because it is out of the loop. Which file? This file. Oh, yes. Yeah. So everything just needs to be indented like this. Okay. Oh no. Can you still see my screen?
No, we don't see a screen now.
Stop sharing. Just share.
Grady, if we may please also be mindful of time, just
Okay.
wrap it up in about 5 minutes.
All right.
Thank you so much. We can see your screen now, Grady. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Let me run this again. All right. There we go. So, all right. Great. So as you can see now, after all the fixes that we've made, indenting everything, now our files should be sorted. We have under the articles folder, I see we only have the articles. Um, just need to make sure data folder. Okay, I see only the data files, the Excel files. Notes, it's picking up notes only. Interviews, okay. Interviews picks up interviews only. And as you can see, it did that for us without us having to do that manually. Obviously, if you're writing code yourself, then it takes a bit of time. But the same exact code you see here, you can get it from a prompt, maybe on some Gen AI, tools, whatever AIs you guys use or people are comfortable with, you can get the exact same code if you use the correct prompt. And basically, that can be used not only in this context, but you can also use it for literature reviews. You can use it for data organizations, file management, research preparations, and there are just so many things you can do with it. Obviously, changing the context, some logic might change here and there, but overall, it does the exact same thing. And computational thinking, it's if you remember maybe one thing today, let it be that computational thinking is about breaking down problems into simple, repetitive steps. Because with that exact same code or with that exact same block of code that I have there, I can use it to do many other things by just changing variables. You can use it to loop not only through files, but even data inside the files. And yeah, basically that's what I have for you guys today. I encourage you to start small, identify one repetitive tasks in your research, break it down into small steps, and think about how you can apply, these simple rules and improve it as time goes on. Thank you for your time and attention. I hope we all received something today.
Thank you so much, Grady. This was a lovely session that we had with you. We're hoping to host you again very soon. Ideally, we will like to have a session where we're able to break down the activities we're doing for us who are still making sure we're not backspacing and there's no space within the code and it can't loop. But thank you so much. We definitely are going to be hosting again in the future. For those that are joining us from our YouTube channel account, please stay engaged, comment and reshare, and we'll see you again soon.